Okay, bore da pawb. So da chi bore yma? Great. Gobeithio da chi'n mwynhau Efengil a Ioan. So good morning, and I hope you're doing well. Are you okay this morning? Yeah, and I hope you are enjoying the Gospel of John that we have been I was going to say ploughing, that's not a good word, looking at and studying over quite a long time now. But you'll notice there's nothing up on the slide yet, on the screen, because does anybody know where we have arrived, at which chapter we are on in the book of John? 8. Yes, absolutely correct. Yes, we're in the chapter 8, and we are carrying on from last week that John spoke, didn't he, last week? And haven't we had some great messages? It's been brilliant, hasn't it? I think there's been everything in there. There's been encouragement, there's been some challenge, and you know, you don't need to miss any. Just a little bit of a reiteration, if you like, and a reminder that all of the talks get uploaded onto YouTube. Thank you, Karen. And the link goes out every week as well in the weekly email notice. So do catch up. Don't miss any of these fantastic talks. Okay, so just for a very, very brief time, I mean, we're talking brief, like a minute, what I want you to do is just going to chat in just 2s and 3s where you are. You will not have to move. So what I want you to do is have a little think, because there's been a lot of stuff that we've heard over the last few months, and there's been a lot of things that John has recounted in the gospel about Jesus and Jesus' claims. And John loves a good old metaphor. There's been a lot of metaphors. So what I want you to do is just where you are, just speak to somebody, literally about a minute. How many can you remember? What claims of Jesus have we heard? Any metaphors you remember? Very quickly, see what we can come up with. Go. All right, fantastic. What have we come up with? Just shout out anything that you might have remembered. Bread of life, yeah, bread of life. Good shepherd, okay, fantastic. Anything else? Living water. Yeah, brilliant. So if you put the next slide up for me, Karen. Yeah, right at the beginning, we had the Lamb of God. And yes, we had the bread of life. Rachel spoke about the water. And then today we are looking at the light. Okay, fantastic. So we've got another metaphor. This time it is the light. And what a fantastic, actually, introduction we've already had through our worship, and even those fantastic images at the beginning. Really good. And you get the impression, don't you, that like Jesus is giving his listeners so many opportunities. It's like, well, you know, you've got to believe this by now, haven't you? Because he's just repeating and giving so many different examples. You know, I used to teach. I was a school teacher, and as every good teacher knows, that what you do is you repeat. You do a lot of repetition for your students. You reframe some information. You kind of say it in a different way. You pack in a load of visuals there. So I did language, so it's all about the visuals. And metaphors, stories are just brilliant for teaching. And of course, Jesus was the best teacher, so he uses metaphors. So, you know those shampoo adverts? Don't worry, I'm not going crazy. I remember in the past, you used to get those shampoo adverts, and then they would say, and now for the science bit. So, now for the history bit. No science, can't do science. But before we just get into this a bit deeper, before we read the passage from John chapter 8, the history, just a little bit of context, because I think it's really important at this stage to see where Jesus is speaking and what that meant for his hearers. So you might remember that in chapter 8 now, we have come to the end of the Feast of the Tabernacles. And this feast was all about commemorating the way that God provided for his people, for the Jewish forefathers in the desert and in the wilderness. So they used to come along, they would come to this big festival, and they would build shelters, which they called booths, and that would help them to remember the way that God gave them a home. There was a water rite, and then the final one was the lighting of the candelabras. And they were massive. There was 4 of these big candelabras, which you can see there on the left. And they reminded the Jews of the time in the past when God provided light for them through the cloud and the pillar. So the cloud led through the day and the fire through the night. And the Pharisees knew this context. They understood the significance of this light. And so that makes it really important when we look today at where he's speaking. Because verse 20, as you'll hear in a moment, he's standing in the exact spot where these candelabras were. But they're not lit, you see. They're not lit anymore because the feast is more or less finished. So imagine the scene. The night before, the candles have been lit. Maybe can get a bit of a sense of this. This is the best I could come up with. They have got the sound of the party and the music sort of ringing in their ears. They've got the light that came through the temple courtyards, and it actually lit the whole of Jerusalem. So all of this is sort of casting a glow and ringing in their ears, as now it's kind of finished and everything is ended. It's a little bit like after Christmas, you know, when you've taken all the decks down and everyone's gone home and the food's been eaten, and it's like, oh, okay, it's a bit flat. But then Jesus comes and speaks to them. And this is what he says. We've got the English and the Welsh, but I will be reading it in English. Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness, because you will have the light that leads to life. The Pharisees replied, you are making those claims about yourself. Such testimony is not valid. Jesus told them, these claims are valid enough, even though I make them about myself, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you don't know this about me. You judge me by human standards, but I do not judge anyone. And if I did, my judgment would be correct in every respect, because I am not alone. The Father who sent me is with me. Your own law says that if 2 people agree about something, their witness is accepted as fact. I am one witness, and my Father who sent me is the other. Where is your Father? They asked. Jesus answered, since you don't know who I am, you don't know who my Father is. If you knew me, you would also know my Father. Jesus made these statements while he was teaching in the section of the temple known as the treasury. But he was not arrested because his time had not yet come. What we're going to do for the rest of this time together is just dig a little bit deeper into what is going on here and what Jesus is saying. And I'm going to sort of give you 3 words beginning with M. Okay, 3 words beginning with M. So we're going to look at the metaphor, the merit, and the mission. Okay, so the metaphor, I am the light of the world. Can you see then what an apt metaphor this was? Jesus is standing in that very place where the light has been such a bright light glowing, but he's saying, I am here now. Yes, God provided. Yes, you know all the history. Yes, God provided for your forefathers, but now he has sent me. I am the embodiment of God. I am the glory of God. I am the light. It's huge. This is really huge, guys, isn't it? And to just maybe think about the hugeness of that just for a moment or two. Just close your eyes, would you, for me? Just close your eyes. And I want you to imagine never having light again. The things that you wouldn't see, the flowers, the trees, some of those beautiful views that we saw on the screen earlier. But it's not just like being blind and not having sight. What would that world be like that never has light? Because things would die. Things wouldn't happen as they ought to happen if there was never any light. And if I asked you in the darkness, with your eyes closed or with a blindfold, to walk towards me now, I wonder if you could do that without stumbling over something. Certainly I wouldn't. I would definitely clang into something and stumble. Okay, you can open your eyes. We know, don't we, 3 basic things about the light. This is not going to be news, I don't think, to anybody. Light is our basic source of life, isn't it? We need light to live. Things need light to grow. Yeah, I don't think I need to say more than that at this point. It's a basic source of life for us. Light is a basic source of truth. Our environment is revealed to us because of the light. So now that you can see, if I asked you to walk up, maybe Ash, because he's got the most obstacles, he can see that there's a table there he's not got to negotiate. There's some mats and cushions, goodness knows what else. So things are revealed. He can see things that are in front of him. The truth of his environment is revealed. And I don't think I need to say a lot about joy. It's a basic source of joy for us and beauty. Just the way we all responded to those pictures this morning. Just the way I think we know beauty and joy do go hand in hand. We wouldn't have those things without light. Okay, so what is Jesus' merit then? Let's go on to the second M, the merit, or his claim, if you like. What does he say? How does he qualify these 3 basic sources of life? How can he say that I am the light? Because, of course, you see, the Pharisees were refusing to believe him, weren't they? They didn't trust the evidence. They wanted more evidence. They didn't trust his merit, and they wanted more witnesses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at that section this morning with you of what that interaction was between Jesus and the Pharisees, but I think basically the following slide sums up Jesus' position. Anything that is not light needs the light of a witness to illuminate it, to defend it, to expose it. But light is light. It doesn't need light to illuminate it. He is light and he's sufficient. That's what his claim is. That's his merit. I wonder whether you have enough evidence today to believe him. So recently, very recently this week, I watched a film. John was away. I get to watch films that he doesn't like when he's away. So this little clip that I'm going to show you, very short, but it is from a book called Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. Some of you might have heard of it. I didn't know they'd made a film. And there was just this part in it that I thought, wow.
Look. That's the life I want to offer you, Angel. One full of color, warmth, beauty and light. Just give me a chance.
You knew half of what I did.
Okay, in case you didn't quite get what he said. Look, that's the life I want to give you, Angel. One full of colour and warmth and beauty and life. Just give me a chance. So this is husband and wife, and she's very broken, and he's a representative. It's based on the book of Hosea, and he is a a metaphor, I guess, for God and God redeeming his people. So this is Jesus' merit, his claim. He came to earth as a mediator so that we can have this light full of colour and warmth and beauty and life in our lives. So going back to those three basic sources of life then, how does Jesus fulfill them? So he is ultimate life because he promises eternal life. You know, when you are in the light, plants are in the light, they grow, don't they? We know that things grow. And we will grow. If we are living in Jesus' light, we should change. We will be different. We will grow in a good way. We will be energized. We will be fulfilled. And Jesus is ultimate truth because he reveals God to us. He reveals what God is like. How do we know what God is like? Well, we've got Jesus. He reveals the truth. It's the only way to know God fully is through Jesus, his son. And he shows us the path. He shows us where we need to walk. He guides us in that direction, where to walk safely so that you don't stumble. And Jesus is ultimate joy because just look at the world that he's created. This is the light and life he wants to offer you. Will you give him a chance? Maybe you've done that already. Many of you have done that already, I know. So how are you doing with the mission? So number 3. So we've had the metaphor, merit, and now the mission. Because Jesus didn't just say, I am the light of the world. No. If you remember in verse 12, he goes on to say, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. It's going to change us. Light changes things, doesn't it? When things are revealed, when light comes, changes the way things look, how we perceive things. So how are you doing with that? That call, if you like. Jesus is called the mission. And I want to just look at 3 different ways that I think that mission plays out for us, how Jesus wants us to live. And the first way is this, and that is to live with consistency and integrity. So are you the same person in church on a Sunday as you are on Monday morning at the breakfast table or on the school run or in work or down the shops? Do the people in your world, your family, your colleagues, your neighbours, do they trust you? Do they know you as a person who is honest, non-judgmental? Some of you are hiding. Some of you may be hiding something from a spouse, a parent, a child, a friend, maybe even hiding from yourself. We love hiding from ourselves, don't we? That's very easy. You know, that anger, that jealousy, that resentment, that fear, that judgmental spirit, whatever it might be, I'll just kind of push that away. I'll just forget that that's there. I won't bring that to God. I'm just going to keep that. I'm just going to hide that. So it's not even acknowledging. It's certainly not challenging it. What is going on in the dark? Because you see, light exposes the darkness, doesn't it? It reveals. And Jesus sees everything. So he says, do not be different in the darkness than you are in the light. And just something else I really felt I wanted to bring, that I felt God was saying, very much connected with the above, but something about artificial. You know, I don't know how many of us or who this might be relevant to, it might not be, but you might be able to fool people around you with motives, appearance, behavior, actions, even. But God says, don't be an artificial light. Be the real deal. Shine the true light. And the second way, the second part of the mission, he wants us to live attractively. Now, that might seem a weird thing to say. Let me explain. Let me ask us all a question. Do we know, do we realize, do we understand that people watch us? How we treat other people? Who we have time for? Who we don't have time for? You know, do we listen with care and compassion? Perhaps when we're in a rush and we'd rather be doing something else. How do we speak to the outcast or the bully at school, or maybe it's just somebody in the village or somebody that everyone else finds really boring and hard work. Do we exude peace? I wonder if we have that quality like Jesus. Yes, the Pharisees are finding him actually quite annoying. They're quite perplexed, but how many people were attracted by Jesus? They wanted to be in his presence, didn't they? I wonder, do people want to be in our presence? And when they've been in our presence, do they feel better? Do they think, oh, wow, that was really good to spend time with Karen, with Christine, with Kate? So it's a good question to ask ourselves. Who is attracted to you because of how you live beautifully? And I'm not talking perfectly. We're not Jesus. We're not going to do that all the time. But it's a challenge to us, isn't it? And so the last one, live courageously. Because you see, if we are living as people of light, light exposes the darkness. You know, Jesus did exactly that, didn't he? Do you remember the story of the woman caught in adultery that John brought last week? He forgave her, but he exposed, he called it out. And it might be to live courageously might mean standing up to that bully, whether that's in school or college or in work, maybe even someone in the family, calling out unfairness, prejudice, challenging wrongdoing when you can see that something is wrong, maybe making those difficult decisions, and difficult decisions that actually might cost you, might cost me. That's living courageously. And furthermore, some of you might have been in situations where the dark deeds, in fact, of others have greatly hurt and impacted you. And it's tough. That is tough. And I think it's really hard to live courageously when that is the case. Some of you have been through and maybe are still going through valleys, dark valleys. And they may be valleys of pain or illness, maybe relationship breakdown, loss, grief. It takes courage, doesn't it, to stand on Jesus' merit, to stand on Jesus' claim. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness. See, when it's dark, it seems as if those valleys are weighing you down, doesn't it? But you won't be overcome. This is what the verse means. You won't have to walk in darkness. You won't be overcome by the darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. That's what verse 12 is. That's the claim. That's the promise. You won't have to walk in the darkness. You will have the light that leads to life. Wow. I think of it like a spotlight. I was kind of going to bring this really bright light we have at home. I didn't. But you get the point. A spotlight, and it just beams in one place, doesn't it? And I think of it as everywhere being dark, but the spotlight being on you. And Jesus' light being on you if you're in that valley, in that dark place. And where you move, it moves, and the light is just on you, and it's just giving you enough illumination to see and to not stumble. And as you move the next step, it follows you, and you've got enough light for the next step. And then you've got enough light for the step after that, and then the step after that. And don't they say that the light shines brightest in the darkest places? Almost finished. But I came across this little quote on the next slide, which is actually from a website about building and design. Okay, but surrounding light, which is outside light that envelops you, is always better than artificial light because it's stronger and brighter. And I think it wonderfully sums up the light of the world. You know, remember those three basic sources of life that we talked about? Jesus' light is much better than any other light by which we may choose to illuminate our life. Jesus' light is so much better and stronger than any by which we can know the truth and be, in fact, the truth to others. And Jesus' light is so much better, enabling us to recognize and become the joy and beauty in our world. So we're going to respond rather than just going away and maybe you forget. But I've put three, in fact, questions on the response slide here. And there might be something else. I've just put a few prompts, if you like. Where am I not living consistently and or maybe living a bit in the dark? Where am I aware that my light's a bit artificial? Or maybe you're in a place where actually you've not quite accepted that Jesus is the light of the world. Do you need to accept that the light is Jesus today? Or maybe something else has resonated, something about living courageously. But something, hopefully, God has spoken to you this morning. And now we're going to just play a bit of music. And you do have paper, little bits of paper under your seat. There are some pens at the back. You don't have to write anything down. But what I'm suggesting is that you could do. So very often if we just think about something, it's okay, and we can still have a sense of just going away. But if we actually activate that, and maybe there's just a word, just maybe one word that has stuck with you, or just a sentence, or just a question that you actually want to not forget, and you want to ponder on that a little bit more during the week. If you've got a pen, just make a note of that as we listen to some music. Grab a pen if you don't have one, just so that it just settles a little bit more and God can carry on speaking to you. And if any of the things that have been spoken today have resonated and caused you to actually, I want to speak to somebody, or I want some prayer about this, then do come and ask myself, Phil, Dolan, and the small group leaders. Be very, very happy and willing to pray with you as well.